Undercover black boss told to use the back door. Minutes later, he fires the whole staff. The mahogany desk in Elijah Carter's corner office had seen many difficult conversations, but none quite like this one. 3 manila envelopes lay spread before him, each containing anonymous letters that made his stomach churn with a mixture of rage and disbelief. The floor-to-ceiling windows of his downtown Atlanta headquarters offered a panoramic view of the city he'd grown to love, but today, even the golden afternoon sunlight couldn't brighten his darkening mood. "Sir, I really think you should reconsider going yourself," Marcus Williams, his chief operating officer, said from across the desk. His voice carried the weight of genuine concern. "We have protocols for this kind of investigation. Let me send our compliance team first." Elijah picked up the first letter again, though he'd already memorized every damning word. The handwriting was shaky, as if the person had been nervous while writing it. "They told my grandmother she couldn't eat inside because her kind made other customers uncomfortable. She's 78 years old and has been coming to soul food restaurants since before you were born. This isn't right." The second letter was typed, clinical in its precision. "Cash transactions are happening without receipts. Staff pockets money from walk-in customers, especially minorities who they assume won't complain to corporate. I've witnessed this multiple times as an employee who cares about your company's reputation." But it was the third letter that made Elijah's hands tremble with barely controlled fury. Written in careful block letters, it read, "Your Atlanta Peachtree location has become a disgrace to everything you claim to stand for. They segregate customers, steal money, and treat black customers like criminals. If you truly built this company on values of dignity and respect, you need to see what's happening in your own backyard." Elijah Carter had built Carter's Soul Kitchen from nothing. 15 years ago, he was a line cook working double shifts to pay for business school at night. His grandmother's recipes, combined with his relentless work ethic and business acumen, had transformed a single food truck into a chain of 47 restaurants across the Southeast. Every location was supposed to embody the same principles: excellent food, warm hospitality, and respect for every customer who walked through their doors. The success hadn't come easy. He'd faced rejection from over 30 banks before finding one willing to give a young black entrepreneur a chance. He'd worked 18-hour days, slept in his office, and sacrificed relationships to build something that would make his late grandmother proud. More than that, he'd wanted to create spaces where people like her, people like him, would always be welcomed with dignity. "Marcus, you don't understand," Elijah said, his voice steady but his eyes blazing. "This isn't just about protocol or proper procedures. If what these letters are saying is true, then everything I've built, everything I stand for, is being destroyed by people wearing my company's uniform." He stood up and walked to the window, his reflection staring back at him, a successful 42-year-old black man in a tailored suit, but underneath it all, still the kid from East Atlanta who remembered what it felt like to be judged by the color of his skin rather than the content of his character. "But going in undercover?" Marcus pressed. "Elijah, you're recognizable. Your face has been in Atlanta Business Journal, Entrepreneur Magazine. What if someone recognizes you?" Elijah turned back with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Marcus, when was the last time you saw a wealthy black CEO dressed in street clothes? People see what they expect to see. And right now, I need to see what's really happening when Elijah Carter, the businessman, isn't in the room." The plan was simple in its elegance. Elijah would dress down, hoodie, jeans, old sneakers, and visit the Peachtree location as an ordinary customer. No advance warning, no corporate entourage, no carefully orchestrated inspection. Just a man walking into a restaurant that bore his name, expecting to be treated with basic human decency. That evening, Elijah sat in his car outside his Buckhead penthouse, staring at himself in the rearview mirror. Gone was the expensive suit, the gold watch, the confident bearing of a successful CEO. In their place was a deliberately unremarkable young black man in a gray hoodie and worn jeans. The transformation was so complete that he barely recognized himself. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife, Jasmine. "Promise me you'll be careful. And promise me you won't do anything you'll regret." He typed back, I promise I'll do what's right. That's all I can promise. The drive to the Peachtree location took 25 minutes through Atlanta's evening traffic. With each mile, Elijah felt the weight of expectation and dread settling on his shoulders. Part of him hoped the letters were exaggerated, that maybe there had been misunderstandings or isolated incidents blown out of proportion. But another part of him, the part that had experienced racism firsthand, the part that knew how quickly respectability could be stripped away, prepared for the worst. Carter's Soul Kitchen on Peachtree Street sat in a bustling mixed-income neighborhood, the kind of area Elijah had specifically chosen for its diversity and community feel. The building was beautiful, red brick with large windows and his grandmother's favorite quote painted in elegant script across the front. "Food is love made visible." Even now, in the gathering dusk, it looked welcoming and warm. But as Elijah approached the front door, something felt different. The usual bustle of happy customers seemed muted. An elderly black couple walked past the main entrance and headed around to the side of the building. A young Latino family hesitated at the front door before also moving toward the back. Elijah's heart began to race, not with nervousness, but with a growing certainty that the anonymous letters had only scratched the surface of what was really happening at his restaurant. He pulled his hoodie up slightly, took a deep breath, and pushed open the front door of Carter's Soul Kitchen, having no idea that the next few minutes would change everything, not just for this restaurant, but for his entire understanding of the empire he thought he'd built on principles of equality and respect. The brass bell above the door chimed cheerfully as he stepped inside, a sound that had always filled him with pride. Tonight, it felt like a warning bell, announcing the arrival of a reckoning that was 15 years in the making. The familiar aroma of cornbread and collard greens hit Elijah like a wave of nostalgia, but the warmth he expected to feel was immediately replaced by an icy chill. The restaurant's interior looked exactly as it should: warm lighting, family photos on the walls, his grandmother's handwritten recipes displayed in frames. But something was fundamentally wrong with the atmosphere. Behind the hostess stand stood a young white woman, maybe 25, with bleached blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. Her name tag read, Brittany. She was laughing loudly with two other staff members, their conversation punctuated by casual profanity that would have gotten them fired on the spot at any other Carter's Soul Kitchen location. But as soon as she noticed Elijah approaching, her entire demeanor shifted. Her smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of suspicion and barely concealed disgust. She looked him up and down with the kind of obvious judgment that made Elijah's skin crawl. This wasn't the subtle racism he'd learned to navigate in boardrooms. This was raw, unfiltered prejudice. "Can I help you?" she asked, but her tone suggested she had no intention of helping anyone. "Yes, I'd like a table for one, please," Elijah said politely, keeping his voice even despite the adrenaline beginning to course through his veins. Brittany's eyes narrowed as she took in his hoodie and jeans. She glanced back at her coworkers, who had stopped their conversation to watch the interaction with barely concealed amusement. "A table?" she repeated, as if he'd asked for something completely unreasonable. "Look, honey, I don't think you understand how this works. We don't serve people like you up front." The words hit Elijah like a physical blow. People like you. In his own restaurant. Under his own company's name. Wearing uniforms he'd personally approved. "I'm sorry, what do you mean by people like me?" Elijah asked, his voice remaining calm but his hands beginning to tremble with rage. Brittany rolled her eyes dramatically. "Don't play dumb with me. You know exactly what I mean. If you're here to pick up trash from the dumpster or deliver something, you need to use the back entrance. We've got paying customers up front." The casual cruelty of her words was breathtaking. Elijah had prepared himself for discrimination, but this level of brazen disrespect exceeded even his worst expectations. Around him, he could see other customers beginning to notice the commotion. A few white patrons looked uncomfortable but said nothing. The staff members behind Brittany were now openly smirking. "I'm not here to pick up trash," Elijah said, his voice carrying just a hint of steel. "I'm here to eat. I'm a customer." Brittany's laugh was sharp and mean. "A customer? With what money?" Look, I've seen your type before. You come in here trying to cause trouble, looking for a handout or planning to dine and dash. We're not running a charity here." The irony was staggering. This woman was essentially calling the owner of the restaurant a charity case in his own establishment. But Elijah knew that revealing his identity now would defeat the purpose of his undercover investigation. He needed to see how far this would go. "If you just show me to a table," he began. "Manager!" Brittany suddenly shouted, loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. "Manager! We've got a situation up here!" Every head in the restaurant turned toward them. Elijah felt the familiar burn of public humiliation, not because he was ashamed of who he was, but because he was witnessing the complete destruction of everything he'd worked to build. A middle-aged white man in a wrinkled manager's shirt hurried over. His name tag identified him as Rick, assistant manager. Rick took one look at Elijah and immediately adopted the same hostile stance as Brittany. "What seems to be the problem here?" Rick asked, but he was looking at Elijah as if he were the problem. "This guy is trying to get a table," Brittany explained with exaggerated exasperation. "I told him we don't see people like him up front, but he's not getting the message." Rick nodded as if this was perfectly reasonable. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You're making our customers uncomfortable, and we reserve the right to refuse service." "I haven't done anything wrong," Elijah said quietly. "I just want to buy dinner." "Look, troublemaker," Rick said, his voice rising. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this is a respectable establishment. We don't need people like you coming in here causing problems. Leave now, or I'll call the police." The threat hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Around them, the restaurant had gone nearly silent, with customers and staff watching the confrontation unfold. Elijah could see smartphones being raised, could hear whispered conversations starting. In the age of social media, this kind of incident could go viral within hours. But what struck him most wasn't the public humiliation or even the overt racism. It was the casual, practiced nature of it all. This wasn't an isolated incident or a bad day. This was clearly standard operating procedure. These people had done this before, many times, and they were comfortable with it. Elijah looked around the restaurant one more time, taking in the faces of his employees who were destroying his life's work with their hatred. He memorized their faces, their names, their casual cruelty. Then he did something that surprised everyone in the room, including himself. He smiled. Not a defeated smile or a bitter one, but a small, knowing smile that held secrets none of them could imagine. "You're absolutely right," he said quietly. "I'll leave now." He turned and walked toward the door, his heart pounding with fury and determination. Behind him, he could hear Brittany's triumphant laughter and Rick's satisfied grunt. They had no idea that they had just sealed their own fate. 15 minutes. That's all it took for Elijah Carter to transform from a humiliated customer back into the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. He sat in his Mercedes in the restaurant parking lot, hands shaking as he dialed his assistant's number. "Sarah, I need you and David from compliance at the Peachtree location. Now. Full suits, badges, everything. We're doing an emergency audit." "Sir, it's almost 8 p.m. Anna." "Sarah." His voice cut through her protests like ice. "Now." While he waited, Elijah sat in his car watching the side entrance of his restaurant. What he saw made his blood run cold. A steady stream of Black and Latino customers approached the main entrance, only to be redirected to a small side window. They ordered through the window like it was a fast food drive-thru, received their food in plain paper bags, and left. Meanwhile, white customers walked freely through the front door and were seated immediately. This wasn't just discrimination, this was segregation. In 2024. In his restaurant. A black BMW pulled up beside him, followed by a white sedan. Sarah Martinez, his executive assistant, stepped out wearing a sharp business suit, her compliance badge gleaming under the parking lot lights. David Chin, his head of regional compliance, emerged from the second car carrying a briefcase and tablet. "What's the situation?" Sarah asked as they approached his car. Elijah's transformation was startling. Gone was the hoodie and jeans. He now wore a charcoal gray suit, crisp white shirt, and his signature gold watch. His posture radiated the authority of a man who owned 47 restaurants and employed over 2,000 people. "We're about to find out exactly what kind of business is being run under my name," he said grimly. The three of them walked through the front door of Carter's Soul Kitchen like a force of nature. The same brass bell chimed, but this time it announced the arrival of Judgment Day. Brittany looked up from the hostess stand, and her face went white. The casual arrogance from 15 minutes earlier evaporated instantly. She stammered something incoherent as Rick the manager came rushing over, his earlier confidence replaced by visible panic. "Mr. Carter?" Rick's voice cracked. "Sir, we weren't expecting." "Clearly," Elijah said, his voice carrying the cold authority of a man who had just witnessed his life's work being destroyed. "David, I want full access to all security footage from the past month. Sarah, get me every register report, transaction log, and employee file. And I want it now." The restaurant, which had been buzzing with dinner conversation, fell into stunned silence. Customers looked around in confusion as staff members began whispering urgently among themselves. Word spread quickly through the kitchen. The owner was here, and he was furious. David immediately went to work accessing the security system while Sarah positioned herself at the main register. What they uncovered in the next 30 minutes was a masterclass in systematic fraud and discrimination. The security footage told a horrifying story. Camera after camera showed the same pattern: minority customers being turned away from indoor seating, forced to order through the side window, or simply told the restaurant was full, while empty tables sat available. One particularly damning clip showed Brittany literally laughing as an elderly black woman was redirected to the back entrance. But the financial fraud was even more sophisticated than Elijah had imagined. David discovered a parallel cash system that was invisible to corporate oversight. When minority customers ordered through the side window, their transactions were often processed without receipts. The cash went directly into staff pockets while the food was written off as waste or samples. "Sir, look at this," Sarah called out, her voice tight with anger. She held up a stack of handwritten receipts that looked nothing like the official Carter's Soul Kitchen receipts. "They've been creating fake receipts for cash transactions. The numbers don't match our POS system at all." Rick stood nearby, his face pale and sweaty. "Mr. Carter, I can explain." "Don't." Elijah's voice was deadly quiet. "David, what's the damage?" David looked up from his tablet, his expression grim. "Conservative estimate? They've stolen at least $40,000 in the past 6 months. And that's just what I can track from the incomplete records." A cook emerged from the kitchen, a young black man who looked terrified. "Mr. Carter? Sir? I need to tell you something." "Go ahead, Jerome," Elijah said, reading the man's name tag. They told us to watch for certain types of customers. Said they don't tip good and cause trouble. They made us cook different food for the side window orders, cheaper ingredients, smaller portions. They said..." Jerome's voice broke. "They said people ordering from the side wouldn't know the difference anyway." The revelation hit Elijah like a physical blow. Not only were they segregating customers and stealing money, but they were also serving inferior food to minority customers who were paying full price. Sarah discovered the final piece of the puzzle, a group text message thread between staff members titled, "Get a Watch." The messages were filled with racist language, coded warnings about problem customers, and detailed instructions on how to process cash-only orders without creating corporate records. "Show me that thread," Elijah demanded. The messages were worse than anything he could have imagined. Staff members shared photos of customers, made racist jokes, and celebrated successfully, redirecting people they deemed undesirable. One message from Brittany read, "Got another one to use the back door today. These people are so dumb they don't even know they're being played." Elijah stared at the phone screen, feeling something break inside his chest. These weren't just isolated incidents or misguided employees. This was a carefully orchestrated system of oppression operating under his company's name, funded by his success, and protected by a web of lies and fake paperwork. He looked around the restaurant, at the staff members who were now clustering together in whispered panic, at the confused customers, at the family photos on the walls that represented everything he tried to build. "Clear the restaurant," he said quietly. "Everyone out. Customers, staff, everyone. We're shutting down. Tonight." The reckoning had begun. The silence in Carter's soul kitchen was deafening as the last confused customer was escorted out. Only staff members remained, huddled together like conspirators caught in the act. The warm, welcoming atmosphere that Elijah had carefully crafted over 15 years had been replaced by the cold, fluorescent reality of a crime scene. Elijah stood in the center of the dining room, his presence commanding absolute attention. Sarah had locked the front door and flipped the sign to "Closed." David continued documenting evidence on his tablet, each discovery more damning than the last. "Everyone sit down," Elijah commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Kitchen staff, servers, management, everyone. Now." The employees shuffled to tables like school children called to the principal's office. Brittany kept glancing toward the exit, her earlier arrogance completely evaporated. Rick wiped sweat from his forehead with a napkin, his manager's shirt now wrinkled and stained with perspiration. "Let me tell you what I know," Elijah began, pacing slowly between the tables. "I know about the cash skimming. I know about the fake receipts. I know about the side window segregation. I know about the Ghetto Watch text thread. And I know that 47 minutes ago, you people humiliated me in my own restaurant." Brittany's face went completely white. The realization hit her like a freight train. The troublemaker in the hoodie was the man who owned everything around her. "Mr. Carter," Rick stammered, rising from his chair. "Sir, I had no idea any of this was happening. I'm just the assistant manager. I don't control what." "Sit down, Rick," Elijah said quietly, but his tone made Rick collapse back into his chair immediately. "David, show them the emails." David cleared his throat and began reading from his tablet. "Email from Rick Patterson to Brittany Mills, dated 3 weeks ago. Remember, cash-only customers through the side window don't need receipts if they don't ask. What corporate doesn't know won't hurt them. Keep the good work up." Rick's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. That's taken out of context." Another email. David continued. "Rick Patterson to all staff. Some customers are more trouble than they're worth. Use your judgment about seating arrangements. We want to maintain our atmosphere for our regular clientele." The coded language was clear to everyone in the room. Rick had been orchestrating the discrimination from a management level, creating a system that allowed staff to act on their prejudices while maintaining plausible deniability. "Rick, you lying piece of..." Jerome, the cook who had confessed earlier, stood up angrily. "Don't you dare act like you didn't know. You're the one who told us to cook different food for side window orders. You said they wouldn't notice the difference." "Jerome, shut up," Brittany hissed, but it was too late. The floodgates had opened. A server named Maria, who had been quietly crying in the corner, suddenly spoke up. "I tried to serve everyone the same way, Mr. Carter. I swear I did. But they threatened to fire me if I didn't follow the protocols. I have 3 kids to feed. I couldn't lose this job." The group began turning on each other with vicious desperation. Accusations flew across the room as the carefully constructed conspiracy crumbled into chaos. "Brittany started the text thread," shouted a kitchen worker. "She's the one who took pictures of customers. Rick told us to do it." Brittany screamed back, tears streaming down her face. "He said corporate would never find out if we were smart about it. You were stealing tips from the jar." Rick pointed at a server. "Don't act innocent." Elijah watched the implosion with cold satisfaction. These people had destroyed his reputation, stolen his money, and humiliated his customers. Now they were destroying each other. But then Brittany did something that changed everything. She fell to her knees in front of Elijah, sobbing hysterically. "Mr. Carter, please! I'm so sorry. I didn't know it was you earlier. If I had known who you were, I never would have. Stop, Elijah said, and his voice cut through her wailing like a blade. The room went silent again. If you had known who I was? Elijah repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. So you're telling me that the only reason you're sorry is because I'm the owner? Not because what you did was wrong. Brittany's sobs intensified, but she couldn't answer. Let me make something crystal clear to all of you, Elijah continued, his voice rising. Every customer who walks through that door deserves respect. Not because they might be the owner in disguise, but because they're human beings. The fact that you can't understand that difference tells me everything I need to know about who you are as people. He pulled out his phone and began making calls while the staff watched in growing horror. Sarah, call legal. I want criminal charges filed for theft. Call the Franchise Compliance Board. I'm revoking this location's license immediately. And call the local news. I want a statement ready within the hour. Rick tried one last desperate gambit. Mr. Carter, sir, we can fix this. Give us another chance. We can make this right. Elijah looked at him with contempt that seemed to fill the entire room. Rick, 15 minutes ago you threatened to call the police on me for trying to buy dinner in my own restaurant. Now you want me to give you another chance? The weight of their complete and utter defeat settled over the group like a suffocating blanket. You're all fired, Elijah said simply. Security will escort you out. Don't bother coming back for your personal belongings. They'll be mailed to you. As if on cue, 3 security guards entered through the back door. The systematic dismantling of their criminal enterprise was as thorough and devastating as the enterprise itself had been. The reckoning was complete. Now came the consequences. The Atlanta News van pulled into the parking lot of Carter's Soul Kitchen at exactly 9:47 p.m., its bright lights cutting through the darkness like searchlights at a crime scene. Inside the restaurant, Elijah Carter sat alone at a corner table, reviewing the mountain of evidence that would destroy careers and likely send several people to prison. His phone hadn't stopped ringing for the past hour. Word was already spreading through Atlanta's tight-knit business community that something major was happening at the Peachtree location. Social media was beginning to buzz with cryptic posts from customers who had witnessed the evening's dramatic events. Sarah approached with a tablet and a grim expression. Sir, the statement is ready for your approval. Legal says we're covered on all fronts. We have enough evidence to support every claim we're making. Elijah read through the press release, each word carefully chosen to deliver maximum impact. For immediate release. Carter's Soul Kitchen permanently closes Atlanta location following discovery of systematic racism and theft. CEO Elijah Carter personally witnessed discrimination, uncovers $40,000 plus theft ring. Atlanta, Georgia. Carter's Soul Kitchen CEO Elijah Carter announced the immediate and permanent closure of the company's Peachtree Street location following the discovery of systematic racial discrimination and organized theft by franchise staff. The investigation began after Carter received multiple anonymous complaints about discriminatory practices. Going undercover as a regular customer, Carter was personally told to use the back door and was refused service by staff who called him a troublemaker. What I discovered was not just isolated incidents of racism, but a carefully orchestrated system designed to segregate customers and steal money, Carter stated. This is not just a betrayal of our company values, it's a betrayal of basic human decency. Evidence uncovered includes systematic segregation forcing minority customers to order through side windows, a coordinated cash theft operation involving fake receipts and off-books transactions, staff text messages celebrating discrimination against customers, deliberately inferior food served to minority customers at full price, management emails directing discriminatory practices. All staff members have been terminated effective immediately. The company is pursuing criminal charges for theft and will cooperate fully with federal civil rights investigations. Carter's Soul Kitchen was built on the principle that everyone deserves dignity and respect. Carter continued. These individuals chose to destroy that legacy while enriching themselves. They will face the full consequences of their actions. The company is offering full restitution to affected customers and has established a hotline for anyone who experienced discrimination at this location. Elijah looked up from the tablet. Send it to every major news outlet in the Southeast. I want this story everywhere by morning. As Sarah worked on her phone, Elijah's mind turned to the franchise owner, a man named Douglas Hamilton who had seemed so earnest during their initial meetings 2 years ago. Hamilton owned 3 Carter's Soul Kitchen locations, and if this level of corruption existed at Peachtree, what was happening at his other restaurants? David, Elijah called out. I want surprise audits at Hamilton's other 2 locations. Tonight. Full forensic accounting and compliance review. David nodded grimly. Already coordinating with the teams. We should have preliminary results by morning. The news reporter, a sharp-eyed woman named Carmen Rodriguez from Channel 7, entered the restaurant with her camera crew. She had covered several of Elijah's business success stories over the years, but tonight her expression was all business. Mr. Carter, this is a shocking situation. How did systematic racism and theft operate under your company's name for so long? Elijah faced the camera directly, his voice steady and controlled. Carmen, that's the question that's going to haunt me. I built this company on principles my grandmother taught me, that food is love, and love doesn't discriminate. The fact that people could pervert those values so completely while wearing our uniform is devastating. What's your message to customers who may have experienced discrimination? First, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that my company's name was used to humiliate you. I'm sorry that people I trusted betrayed not just me, but you. And I promise you that we will make this right. The interview continued for 20 minutes, covering the evidence, the investigation, and the company's response. But it was Elijah's closing statement that would be replayed across news stations for days. Some people will ask why I'm being so public about this, why I'm not handling it quietly. The answer is simple: racism thrives in darkness. Discrimination lives in whispered conversations and coded language. The only way to finish it is to drag it into the light and show everyone exactly what it looks like. As the news crew packed up their equipment, Elijah's phone buzzed with a text from Douglas Hamilton. We need to talk. There are things you don't understand. Elijah showed the message to Sarah. Set up a meeting for tomorrow morning. And make sure legal is present. By 11 p.m., the story was already breaking on social media. #Carter's Soul Kitchen began trending on Twitter as customers shared their own experiences at the Peachtree location. The response was immediate and overwhelming. I knew something was wrong when they made my family order from the side window while white customers went inside. Thank you for doing the right thing, Mr. Carter. Takes courage to admit when your own company fails. This is why representation matters. A white CEO might have buried this story, but there were also critics. This is just a publicity stunt. He's trying to look good by throwing his own employees under the bus. Elijah read every comment, every tweet, every news article that began popping up online. The story was spreading faster than he had anticipated, and the response was more intense than he had expected. His phone rang. It was his wife, Jasmine. I saw the news, she said quietly. How are you holding up? I'm angry, he admitted. I'm angry that this happened, angry that I didn't catch it sooner, angry that people I trusted could be so cruel. What happens now? Elijah looked around the empty restaurant, at the family photos on the walls, at the quote from his grandmother that had guided his entire career. Now we rebuild, he said. But this time, we do it right. The corporate hammer had fallen. Tomorrow would bring the real work of redemption. 3 months later, Elijah Carter stood in the same spot where Brittany had humiliated him, but everything else had changed. The restaurant buzzed with genuine warmth and energy, the kind of atmosphere he had originally envisioned when he first opened Carter's Soul Kitchen. The walls displayed new photos, images of the diverse staff, community events, and local scholarship recipients whose dreams were being funded by the restaurant's success. Mr. Carter, Table 12 would like to thank you personally, said Keisha Williams, the new general manager. A 34-year-old black woman with an MBA and 15 years of hospitality experience, Keisha had impressed Elijah not just with her credentials, but with her genuine passion for community service. At table 12 sat an elderly black woman with silver hair and kind eyes. Elijah recognized her immediately. She was Mrs. Dorothy Johnson, the grandmother from the first anonymous letter who had been told she couldn't eat inside because her kind made other customers uncomfortable. "Mrs. Johnson," Elijah said, approaching her table with genuine warmth. "I'm so honored you came back." "Mr. Carter," she said, reaching out to clasp his hand. "I had to see this for myself. When I heard what you did, how you stood up for folks like me, I knew I had to come support you. Ma'am, I should be thanking you. Your letter started this whole thing. If you hadn't been brave enough to speak up." Mrs. Johnson smiled, her eyes twinkling. "Honey, I've been fighting for respect my whole life. I wasn't about to stop at 78. The transformation of the Peachtree location had been remarkable. After the exposé, Elijah had personally overseen every aspect of the rebuild. He'd hired from the local community, prioritizing people who reflected the neighborhood's diversity. The staff of 18 included former teachers, culinary school graduates, and community leaders, all committed to the restaurant's renewed mission of dignity and respect for every customer. The menu had been redesigned too, featuring recipes from the diverse community the restaurant served. Alongside his grandmother's traditional soul food were dishes representing the neighborhood's Latino, Caribbean, and African immigrant communities. The community plates section donated a portion of profits to local schools and community centers. "Elijah!" called out Marcus Williams, his COO, who had just entered with a familiar face, Jerome, the cook who had blown the whistle on the discrimination scheme. Jerome now wore the crisp uniform of a head chef, having completed an accelerated culinary management program that Elijah had personally funded. "Jerome's got something to show you," Marcus said with a grin. Jerome approached with a tablet, his face beaming with pride. "Mr. Carter, check this out. We just got our health department rating, A+ across the board. And look at these customer reviews." Elijah scrolled through the tablet, reading review after glowing review. "Finally, a restaurant that treats everyone like family. The food is incredible, but what's even better is how welcome they make you feel. This is what community looks like." But the most meaningful change wasn't visible in ratings or reviews, it was in the details. The front entrance prominently displayed a sign in multiple languages. "Everyone welcome." The hostess stand featured photos of community events and local partnerships. Most importantly, there was no side window service. Everyone entered through the front door and was seated with equal dignity. The Carter Community Scholarship Fund, established with the recovered stolen money plus additional corporate contributions, had already awarded full scholarships to 12 local students pursuing careers in business, culinary arts, and community development. The scholarship recipients' photos lined the wall near the entrance, a daily reminder of the restaurant's commitment to lifting up the community. "Mr. Carter," Keisha approached with her tablet. "Channel 7 just called. They want to do a follow-up story on the 3-month anniversary. Carmen Rodriguez specifically requested to interview you." "Set it up," Elijah nodded. "I want people to see what positive change looks like." As the lunch rush continued around him, Elijah's phone buzzed with a text from his wife. "Saw the online reviews for today. Grandma would be so proud." She was right. His grandmother's dream, a place where food brought people together regardless of their background, was finally being fulfilled. But it had taken a journey through darkness to reach this light. The federal civil rights investigation had resulted in criminal charges against Rick and 2 other staff members. Douglas Hamilton had been banned from owning any Carter's Soul Kitchen franchises, and surprise audits of his other locations had revealed similar, though less extensive, discrimination practices. The entire incident had sparked a company-wide review of policies and training that strengthened every location. As Elijah prepared to leave, Mrs. Johnson approached him one more time. "Mr. Carter," she said, "I have something for you." She handed him a handwritten note. He opened it to find her original anonymous letter, but with a new message written at the bottom. "Thank you for proving that one person's courage can change everything. Some folks said you were just protecting your business, but I know better. You were protecting our dignity. That's worth more than money. Elijah folded the letter carefully and put it in his jacket pocket. As he walked toward the front door, the same door where he'd been humiliated 3 months earlier, he paused to look around one more time. The restaurant was exactly what he'd always dreamed it could be, a place where excellent food and genuine respect created something beautiful. The journey had been painful, but it had led to something stronger and more meaningful than what existed before. He stepped outside into the Atlanta sunshine, pulling out his phone to call his next franchise location. There was still work to do, but for the first time in months, Elijah Carter smiled with genuine peace. The next time someone walked into his restaurant, any of his restaurants, they would know exactly who they were talking to, people who understood that dignity isn't negotiable, respect isn't optional, and everyone deserves a seat at the table.